Now in studio is Craig Kafura, Director for Public Opinion and Foreign Policy at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. I saw you shaking your head to a lot of what Robert was saying there. Quite a bit of ground to cover, right? I mean, this was a major meeting. Let's just start with the thawing of tensions. How much do you think that this meeting was able to accomplish that?
Well, I think this was a good start. So if you think about the U.S.-China relationship, things have gotten a lot worse over the past year, right? Tariffs have gotten a lot higher, tensions have gotten a lot higher. So having the two leaders meet, sit down face to face, lower the tension a little bit, and even bring some of those tariff levels down. And you also heard a little bit about, both on the rare earth side and the semiconductor chip side, about delaying some of the more serious trade restrictions. China has agreed to push back their implementation of export controls on rare earths for a year. The United States is going to hold off on implementing more severe export controls for more advanced chips for the next year. So this gives them a little bit of time to work things out and let the working levels now sort out the details.
You want to give China the benefit of the doubt, but in the last decade, if you ask most Americans who our greatest threat is, they would say China. How critical is trust in a meeting like this and seeing what their next moves are? Do they carry through with what they've agreed to do?
Yeah, I think that's going to be a really important thing to watch. So in a lot of ways, especially on the agricultural purchasing side, this feels a lot like the Phase 1 deal that the U.S. and China signed back in 2019. And unfortunately, that deal didn't pan out as we'd hoped, right? The Chinese did not end up purchasing the extra agricultural goods that they had pledged to. Now, to be fair, part of that was the pandemic, right? The pandemic messed up a lot of things. So we'll see if the agricultural purchases come through. We'll see how the working levels are able to negotiate on some of these really sticky points, like finalizing energy purchases, like finalizing that TikTok transfer. We'll see if the sides can come to an agreement there.
China didn't have much of leverage on the TikTok issue. I mean, it was either you agree to this or we shut you down in the U.S. How do you think pride comes into that? You know, that a Chinese company, China was shut out of this deal.
Well, they're shut out partly, right? It sounds like they're still going to have some controlling stake in it. And I think in a lot of ways, the question will be in the details, right? How much of the back end of TikTok, the algorithmic stuff, how much of that gets transferred over to the new company? How much of it is held by ByteDance back in Beijing?
How much they save face. This nuclear talk it raised a lot of eyebrows. What's your read on this, Craig? The fact that it came up and what President said about restoring nuclear testing?
Yeah, the idea of restarting nuclear testing is a little bit odd because the United States, uniquely among sort of the major nuclear nations, has the most capability of understanding how its nuclear warheads will work without needing to actually detonate them, right? We spend a lot of time and energy preparing simulations, working on sort of the computerized versions of these. So we don't need to detonate nuclear warheads to understand how a new design will work. So the idea of going back to testing as a sort of tit for tat is a little odd. Although you also heard the president at the end talking about wanting to bring down the overall levels of nuclear stockpiles around the world. We do know from past statements that the president is concerned about nuclear weapons. This is one of the things he's returned to over and over. And the polling that the Chicago Council has done has found that the spread of nuclear weapons has always been one of the top concerns for the American public, going back 50 years in our research. So I think if the president can bring together the US, maybe China, maybe Russia, to talk about lowering the stocks of nuclear weapons, I think that would be welcomed by everyone around the world.
Yeah. How much of that was a message, do you believe, to Putin right now, given what's going on in Ukraine and some of his threats in the last 3 years?
It's possible. The president may also have been thinking about Kim Jong-un. We heard Robert from South Korea talking about potential meetings down the line, the idea of denuclearizing North Korea. I think if the president was able to go to another summit with Kim and talk about denuclearization in a real way, I think that would also be a big achievement for the president.
So this meeting was crucial, having that line of communication open. What do you expect to see happen before a potential next meeting, whether it's President Trump going to China or the Chinese delegation coming to the U.S.?
So I think the next things to watch out for are implementation. So do the soybean purchases go through? Is the level achieved? Do the rare earth sort of trade continue without more impediment? And then what else do the working level talks achieve? We heard Bessent talking about potential energy purchases through the Canadian pipelines and the Alaskan pipelines. Does that go through? What's the level? How much energy does China need to purchase from the United States? And then, continuing with a Trump visit to China in April, one of the things that we've seen in the U.S.-China relationship is the need for this sort of high-level endorsement at the leader level in order to get the two sides working levels to talk to each other and to cooperate. So if they can continue to meet regularly, that does bode well for a better relationship.
As you said, Craig, this is a start. I appreciate the conversation this morning. Thank you so
Marnie.
much.